In the beginning of the story, we meet a young boy named Almus. Ever since he was little, he had always felt that everything happening around him had already happened once before. Every place he visited and every event he experienced felt strangely familiar, as if he had already lived through it. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could never understand why he felt that way. Everything finally changed on the day he was supposed to receive his divine blessing from the gods. As Almus knelt before the pastor began performing the sacred baptism ritual using magic. The moment the glowing light surrounded him, countless memories suddenly rushed into Almus's mind. His eyes widened in shock as he finally realized why everything had always felt so familiar. This exact scene had happened before, not in this life, but in his previous one. He suddenly remembered that he had once played a fantasy game set in a magical world, and this was the exact same opening scene from that game. At that moment, Almus finally understood the truth. He had been reincarnated into the world of the game he had once played. Soon, the baptism ritual was completed, and Almus's aptitude was revealed. He had been blessed with the powerful class of a heavy knight. Although his current rank was low and he had almost no skills yet, the heavy knight was known for having the highest health and defense among all classes. Almus became excited and happily ran to tell his father that he had become a heavy knight. However, instead of feeling proud, his father's face immediately turned dark with anger. In this world, classes like heavy knight were looked down upon because they required endless training, grinding, and suffering before they became truly powerful. Most people believed they were useless because they started with low stats and very few skills. Filled with disappointment, Almus's father grabbed him by his clothes and angrily called him useless. He shouted that Almus had received a worthless class with no talent and no future. Trying to calm his father down, Almus quickly explained that heavy knights eventually gained the highest health and defense in the entire world. If trained properly, they could become nearly impossible to defeat. But his father refused to listen. Instead, he punched Almus without hesitation. He angrily called him a worthless child who would only bring shame to the family and never achieve anything in his life. At that very moment, the church doors slowly opened. A beautiful young girl named Malice walked inside. She politely introduced herself and said she had come for her own baptism ceremony. The pastor welcomed her and immediately began preparing the sacred ritual. Watching everything from the side, Almus suddenly had a bad feeling. He already knew what was about to happen. If Malice received the class that his father had always wanted him to have, as the baptism ritual came to an end, Malice opened her status window to check her results. The moment she looked at it, a bright smile appeared on her face. She had been blessed with the Master Swordsman class, one of the most respected and powerful classes in the kingdom. Feeling proud of herself, Malice looked at Almus with a mocking smile. She laughed and said that it seemed all the good classes and powerful skills had come to her, while Almus had been left with nothing but a useless class and terrible starting stats. Almus's father was still angry about his son's result, but his mood changed the moment he saw Malice's status. His face was filled with joy because someone from the family had finally received the class he had always hoped for. Without thinking twice, he officially adopted Malice as his daughter. He proudly declared that she would become the future heir of his empire. At the same time, he completely abandoned Almus. In his eyes, Almus was no longer his son. His father ordered the servants to bring Malice into the mansion, while commanding Almus to leave immediately. Desperate, Almus tried to explain that the heavy knight was actually one of the strongest classes in the world if trained correctly. It simply required much more effort than other classes. However, his father refused to listen to a single word. Believing Almus would never become anything important, he threw him out of the mansion with nothing except a small pouch of coins. Just like that, Almus lost both his home and his family on the same day. With nowhere else to go, Almus traveled to a small village and started a new life there. The streets were lively, with merchants selling goods and adventurers walking around, but none of it could lift his spirits. After losing his family, Almus felt completely alone. Even so, he refused to give up. He knew that the heavy knight was actually one of the strongest classes in the game if it was built correctly. However, something else had been bothering him. As he looked around, he realized that the history, the environment, and even the names of the cities were completely different from the game he remembered. Although many things were similar, this world was clearly not exactly the same as the game from his previous life. Feeling confused, Almus opened his status window once again to look more carefully. As he searched through the menu, he finally found what he had been looking for: the skill tree. This special system allowed players to freely choose which abilities they wanted to unlock. To level up skills or learn new ones, they needed to spend game points. At the moment, Almus only had 5 game points. Without hesitating, he spent all 5 points upgrading his fixed skill, Oath of the Armored Knight. Most people considered this skill completely useless because it mainly increased defense instead of attack power. Since everyone preferred dealing high damage, almost nobody chose to invest in defensive abilities. But Almus knew something that nobody else did. Because of his memories from his previous life, he understood the true potential of this skill. The moment he upgraded it, a brand new ability was unlocked: Rampart Reflection. Seeing the new skill appear, Almus smiled with excitement. It was exactly the ability he had been hoping to unlock. Without wasting any time, he headed straight into the nearby forest to test his new power. After walking for a while, he found a level 2 frog monster. The monster immediately noticed Elmas and jumped toward him with an angry cry. Instead of attacking, Elmas calmly activated Rampart Reflection. A large transparent shield instantly appeared in front of him. The frog monster slammed into the shield at full speed. The next second, it was instantly defeated. Surprised, Elmas quickly checked the skill description and confirmed his guess. Rampart Reflection completely blocked incoming attacks and reflected damage back to the enemy based on the user's defense. For a heavy knight with incredibly high defense, this skill was unbelievably powerful. Happy with the result, Elmas picked up his first monster drop. It was a common magic stone. Just then, someone suddenly came running through the forest while desperately shouting for help. A young man was being chased by several frog monsters. The frightened adventurer begged Elmas to save him, believing he was a high-level adventurer. However, Elmas honestly admitted that he had only reached level 1. The young man stared at him in disbelief. Thinking Elmas was completely hopeless, he shouted that a beginner like him would never be able to defeat so many frog monsters. But Elmas remained perfectly calm. He knew he could not attack first because Rampart Reflection only activated when an enemy attacked him, so he simply stood still and waited. One after another, the frog monsters leaped toward him. The moment each one hit the transparent shield, its own attack was reflected back with overwhelming force. One by one, the monsters collapsed until every single frog monster had been defeated. The young adventurer could only watch with his mouth hanging open. He had never seen someone defeat so many monsters without even swinging a weapon. Unable to hide his curiosity any longer, he asked Elmas who he really was. At first, Elmas wanted to introduce himself using his family's noble name, but then he remembered the painful moment when his father had abandoned him and forbidden him from using the family name ever again. After a brief moment of silence, Elmas smiled confidently and gave a different introduction. My name is Elmas, the Heavy Knight. And that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.